The aroma of spices filled the Kapoor household. A typical Delhi morning. Sun streamed through the kitchen window. Anjali Kapoor hummed a Bollywood tune making breakfast. Her husband Vikram read the newspaper sipping his chai. Their two children, Rohan and Priya, argued playfully over a toy. To the outside world they were an ordinary middle-class family. Unremarkable. Content. Vikram kissed Anjali goodbye, grabbing his briefcase. "Another day at the office, darling," he said, forcing a smile. Anjali, lost in her world of grocery lists and school runs, barely noticed the flicker of unease in his eyes. She had no reason to. Life, for her, was a predictable rhythm, a comforting illusion. "Don't be late for dinner," Anjali reminded him, her voice muffled by the clattering of dishes. "It's Rohan's favorite aloo paratha." Vikram nodded, the weight of his unspoken truth heavy on his chest. He shut the door behind him, leaving behind the warmth of his family and stepping into the cold reality of his double life. Vikram Kapoor wasn't who he pretended to be. Behind the facade of a mild-mannered insurance salesman lay a seasoned intelligence operative working for the Research and Analysis Wing, India's external intelligence agency. His current mission: infiltrate and dismantle a nefarious syndicate flooding the nation with plastic rice. For months, Vikram had played the role of a bored, middle-aged man, blending seamlessly into the background. He'd befriended low-level informants, greasy spoon owners, and street vendors, slowly piecing together the puzzle of the syndicate's operation. Each stolen glance, every hushed conversation, brought him closer to the truth. Vikram's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was his handler, Colonel Rathore, a grizzled veteran with eyes that had seen too much. "Meet me at the usual place," Rathore's voice, gruff and businesslike, crackled through the phone. "We need to discuss the next phase, and Vikram," he paused, "be careful, this is bigger than we thought." The auto rickshaw sputtered to a stop, jolting Vikram back to the present. He paid the driver and melted into the throng of people, his mind racing. He knew the risks, the danger that lurked around every corner. But Vikram had made a silent vow to protect his nation, even if it meant sacrificing everything. The syndicate's modus operandi was as cunning as it was cruel. They manufactured synthetic rice grains from industrial polymers, virtually indistinguishable from the real deal. This fake rice was then mixed with genuine rice, packaged and sold at subsidized rates to the poorest sections of society. A perfect crime, preying on the vulnerable, masked behind the veil of charity. This wasn't just food fraud, it was slow poison. The plastic rice, when consumed, wreaked havoc on the digestive system. Victims reported severe gastrointestinal problems, chronic pain, and long-term health complications. The worst part? Many, unaware of the deception, attributed their suffering to poverty or pre-existing conditions. Vikram had seen firsthand the devastating consequences of the syndicate's actions. He'd visited overcrowded hospitals, witnessing the suffering of innocent men, women, and children, their bodies slowly failing them. The memory of their pain fueled his determination to bring the perpetrators to justice. The plastic rice trade was a ticking time bomb, a silent epidemic threatening to engulf the nation. Vikram knew he was fighting not just a criminal network but a monstrous system that thrived on exploiting the weak and marginalized. The syndicate's tentacles reached deep into the heart of the system. Corrupt officials, blinded by greed, turned a blind eye, their silence bought with hefty bribes and promises of power. Politicians, hungry for votes, readily accepted campaign contributions, their conscience silenced by the allure of wealth and influence. Vikram had painstakingly cultivated a network of informants within the syndicate's ranks. Disgruntled employees, mistresses seeking revenge, and low-level operatives desperate for a way out. Their whispers, pieced together like a macabre jigsaw puzzle, painted a grim picture of a vast criminal enterprise operating with impunity. He discovered that the syndicate had bribed officials in the Food Corporation of India, responsible for procuring and distributing subsidized food grains. These corrupt officials turned a blind eye to the adulterated rice, allowing it to seep into the public distribution system, poisoning the nation's poor, one grain at a time. This wasn't just about catching a few criminals, it was about exposing the rot that had set in, the systemic corruption that had eaten away at the nation's soul. Vikram knew that his mission was not just to bring down the Plastic King, but to shake the very foundation of this corrupt edifice. Vikram's mission was fraught with danger. One wrong move, one slip-up, and his cover would be blown. He moved like a phantom, always vigilant, always one step ahead. He gathered evidence meticulously, photographs, audio recordings, and confidential documents, building a watertight case against the syndicate. He infiltrated a clandestine warehouse on the outskirts of Delhi, disguised as a day laborer. The stench of plastic and chemicals hung heavy in the air. Inside, under the dim glow of flickering lights, he witnessed firsthand the sinister operation. Sacks of plastic rice being mixed with genuine grains, ready to be shipped out to unsuspecting victims. The sight filled Vikram with a cold fury. These weren't just criminals, they were monsters playing God with people's lives. He had to stop them, no matter the cost. Time was running out. The longer the syndicate operated, the more people would suffer. Vikram knew he had to act fast, to deliver the killing blow before the Plastic King and his cronies could slither back into the shadows. The plan was audacious, bordering on reckless. Vikram, posing as a wealthy businessman, contacted the syndicate, offering to buy a large consignment of plastic rice. He knew it was a risky gamble, but it was the only way to lure the kingpin out from his lair. The meeting was set in a seedy bar in Old Delhi, a labyrinthine warren of narrow alleys and crumbling buildings. Vikram, his nerves steeled, sat across from the Plastic King, a portly man with shifty eyes and a greasy smile. They bargained, their words laced with veiled threats and promises of untold riches. Unbeknownst to the criminals, the bar was surrounded. Colonel Rathore and his team, armed and ready, waited for Vikram's signal. The tension in the air was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, the moment arrived. As the deal was about to be sealed, Vikram, with the precision of a seasoned operative, switched the briefcase containing the money with an identical one rigged with a tracking device. "It's done," Vikram muttered, his heart pounding against his ribs. With the tracking device in place, Rathore and his team stormed the warehouse where the plastic rice was being stored. The raid was swift and brutal. The criminals, caught off guard, were no match for the highly trained raw operatives. The Plastic King, his face contorted in rage and disbelief, was apprehended along with his cronies. The evidence gathered by Vikram was overwhelming, irrefutable proof of their crimes against humanity. The news of the raid sent shockwaves through the nation. The public, outraged by the scale of the deception, demanded justice. The trial was swift, the evidence undeniable. The Plastic King and his accomplices were found guilty and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The corrupt officials, their greed exposed, were stripped of their power and faced the full force of the law. Vikram, his face hidden in the shadows, watched the news reports, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over him. He had won this round, but the fight was far from over. For every criminal brought to justice, countless others operated in the shadows, their greed fueled by a system that allowed them to thrive. With the mission successfully completed, Vikram slipped back into his life as an unassuming insurance salesman. He returned to Anjali and his children, his heart filled with a mixture of relief and longing. "Papa, you're back early!" Rohan exclaimed, his face breaking into a wide grin. Priya, clutching her favorite doll, ran towards him, her tiny arms wrapped around his legs. Vikram scooped her up in a hug, burying his face in her soft hair. He had missed them, the comforting normalcy of their lives. Here, in the warmth of his family's love, the shadows of his secret life seemed to recede, if only for a little while. That night, as Anjali served his favorite aloo paratha, Vikram noticed a news report on the plastic rice bust. "Those monsters," Anjali muttered, shaking her head in disgust. Vikram nodded, forcing a smile. He wanted to tell her everything, to unburden himself of the weight of his double life. But he knew he couldn't. His duty to his country, his oath to protect, bound him to silence. Life returned to its familiar rhythm. Vikram resumed his charade, the dutiful husband and loving father. But beneath the surface he remained vigilant, the memories of the case etched into his mind. He knew this was just one victory in a never-ending war. The forces of greed and corruption were relentless, always seeking new ways to exploit and deceive. But Vikram was ready. He was the silent guardian, the unseen protector, standing between the innocent and the darkness that threatened to consume them. As he lay in bed, his wife's gentle breathing beside him, Vikram couldn't help but wonder what his next mission would be. Where would his path lead him next? He didn't know. But one thing was certain, he would be ready. For Vikram, Kapoor was more than just a man. He was a shield, a weapon forged in the fires of duty and honor. He was the invisible hand that protected his nation from the shadows.